your topic? Yes. If Ajarn doesn't follow it, I...
Okay. Me and Sarah were talking about how there is seeing, there is hearing, there is touching, smelling, and then there is thinking right afterward. There is thinking, and there is different doors, six doors, and so quick, so difficult for sati to not to see the nimitta of the reality and not the concept of the reality, and so can you explain a bit more about sati and how we can be aware of realities?
It's your sati. It's your sati. Or sati is not yours.
No, it's not.
So no one can make sati to arise, but the understanding, more and more, very firm, will condition sati anytime, anywhere, of anything we don't know. By then, one can understand better about no self, no one, because it's conditioned. Like seeing now, it's conditioned. Hearing now is conditioned. Do you think of sati at moment of seeing and hearing, or understanding that no matter what, sati or not sati is anatta? This is the very beginning. Otherwise, you would like to have it. Try so much. It means that there is no detachment from clinging to the very subtle sati. So just listen to understand, that's all. And Panya will make its own way. Even you don't want sati, it arises by conditions. Yeah.
So it has to be natural, like...
Very natural. It means that you begin to understand more about no I. There are only conditions, even for sati, to be aware of whatever no one knows, because it has arisen yet. This is the only way to have less and less letting go with understanding. But it's very difficult not to have the I, no matter when. It comes in instantly, as long as one forgets that it's not self. Even right now, passed away, never to return again.
And so it has to be, it takes very, very long time to...
Certainly. Not today, or this year, or this life. Just learn to become detached with understanding, because without understanding, it's impossible not to be attached to the self and the result, even of study or understanding. And most people neglect this point. They just want and try, tell them to try, and then they will try. But actually, try not to be attached, because of understanding more and more about no self. No one who can do anything. Because even the first stage of realizing the nature, which is now appear as no one, but the I is there, not knowing that seeing right now is not self. So don't expect for other moment, because even right now there's not enough conditions for sati to arise. Until then, when it arises, there can be more understanding, more confidence on no self. That's why the listeners to the teachings of the Buddha, no matter what time, at what time, can see that there is only one way to understand that which appears now as no self, but it's conditioned. Otherwise, it cannot arise at all. Just understanding. Keep on this path. And the understanding develops little by little until sati arises. By then, there is more confidence on no self. Very natural.
Thank you.
And another point is, we don't ask how can kusala citta arise in between Votapana and Bhavanga cittas in the sense door process, because we know it just arises by conditions, even though it's so quick. And it's the same with sati. It's the same with any reality. The answer is by conditions. It's like that. So just as lobha can sneak in so quickly now, even in the Dhamma discussion, even when discussing Dhamma, so sati can as well, just by conditions, because it's anatta. So one doesn't have to think about how it's too quick for it, or how can it, because actually by conditions it arises, that's all.
And this moment is a test. Anytime.
Yeah, just as soon as one opens one's eye, there is people and things already. Just so akusala is right there.
So slow, very, very slow, because no one can have sati to arise at will at all. But it seems like one has nothing to do at all, but understanding is there or not. Because even understanding is not anyone at all. When sati arises, what do you feel? Pleasant or good or just letting go? See, before there can be moment of letting go, sati, there must be the more and more understanding. So only understand and leave the sati and panya to arise and perform their function.
And it's true that after seeing and hearing, there is thinking so instantly about the shape, the colour, the details. But if one thinks, oh, because they're thinking so quickly, therefore, how can sati arise? It's just moments of doubt and thinking. It's not understanding at that moment. Because even though there is thinking so quickly, still sati can arise. Like even at moments of kusala, there is a level of sati. And when it's with understanding of reality, it is there.
And Ajarn, just to clarify, I think a minute ago, in answering Alberto's question, you mentioned an idea of I still being there, and I think you're referring to the idea of self by that. Is that right? Rather than the thought of I or me.
Otherwise, it's useless to know a lot of Tipitaka without understanding that it depends on understanding.
But there can be ideas of I and me and you without wrong view.
So until sati begins to arise and on and on and on by itself.
Right.
Maybe once in a month, a year, 10 years alive, we don't mind. It means that you understand better about no self because you don't mind at that moment whether sati arises or not.
On the topic of sati, we know if we talk about Sanya, for example, it has two functions: it marks and then remembers. And when we're talking about sati, especially if it's sati of satipatthana, awareness of reality, it is guarding at that moment. It's remembering to be wholesome, because whenever sati arises, it remembers to be wholesome, and it's aware of the reality in this case. Can one say that just as sanya has two functions, sati has two or three functions in the same way?
Do you have to know what moment it performs this function or the other function?
Well, we know that at any moment when sati arises, it performs the function of remembering to be wholesome at that moment. And we know, so at any moment of kusala, and we know that whenever sati arises, it does have that function of guarding. It guards from unwholesomeness.
Do we have to think about it, that it's now guarding?
When it arises, it just happens.
That's why we learn a lot about everything, just to realize the moment when it arises as sati, not self.
Yes. So at that moment, okay, it's clear, because at that moment of kusala, then no akusala, so it is.
That's why without the understanding from hearing and learning more and more, there cannot be conditions for sati.
Right.
But believe or rely on the truth. Sati cannot arise without conditions. And the conditions for its arising is the understanding only.
Yeah.
Only.
And when it is aware of the reality, when we're talking about this sati, then it has that function.
But
So
when it arises, no need to say anything or to think about anything, because it's already
it
activated.
arises and has that, just like we don't have to with sanya talk about it, but actually those functions are there. And earlier there was a question about whether we use awareness or mindfulness, but these are just different translations, because as Jonathan said, in English we don't have the word sati in English language, but even in Thai the word that's used in common language has nothing to do with the reality of sati, which has these particular functions. So whatever term is used is just a word or a term. So that's why there has to be the understanding of the reality itself, no matter what word we use. Maybe in some ways it's a disadvantage to have the word in your own language, because then people think they already understand it because they're used to using it. But like with the visitor, Ajarn was saying, one has to really forget everything one thinks one knows and start at the beginning to understand what each word is, what each reality is.
Yes, actually, Ajarn talks a lot about how, like in Thai language, they use many Pali words. For example, they use the word sati, but they don't understand it correctly.
every word, even panya.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They in
And
Thai,
Dhamma, see.
right. In Thai, usually they think that sati is what you need for crossing the road, right?
Being careful not to get burnt in the kitchen. And
For not forgetting the keys inside the car.
And remembering the dates when you book flights or accommodation.
We were talking the other day about the jhana pachya and the jhanangas, and some friends afterwards asked me to say a little bit more from a basic level up, and also I checked a few more details, and Nina also asked me to follow through with these because she'd like to see if anything needs to be amended in her book. So just to start at the beginning, the word in Pali, jhanangas, refers to either it can refer to the jhana factors that arise with jhana or lead to the attainment of jhana, vitakka, vichara, piti, sukha, samadhi. Or the same word, jhanangas, refers to the factors which are jhana pachya, and in this case they are vitakka, vichara, piti, sukha, domanassa, upekkha, samadhi or ekagata. So in this case there are 7 factors, and in the Visuddhimagga it talks about how it is jhana, or they are jhana factors, because of one meaning is upanijjhana, which is close contemplation of the object, and the second is burning up, or jhapana, opposing the opposite. And in the Patana, it says that this condition, jhana pachya, conditions all citas except the dvi pancha vijnana citas, that is seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting and touching. So it is the condition for 79 citas during life. So now every citta, apart from moments of seeing and hearing, etc., are conditioned by jhana pachya. And the only reason for understanding more about this detail is really to just understand how anatta the citas are now being conditioned in these different ways. And in the Patana text, it talks about how though upekkha, sukha and dukkha are found in the dvi pancha vijnana citas, they are not jhana pachya, they're not jhanangas, because these kinds of consciousness are mere encounters with the object, and they don't have the aspect of close contemplation, upanijjhana karasa. So this implies that at other moments, like at the other moments during the sense door process that we were talking about the other day, or like the first moment of life, the patisandhi citta, or the bhavanga cittas, or the cittas arising immediately after seeing, such as the sampatichana, santirana, they are conditioned by jhana pachya factors such as vitakka and ekagata, but it is not the aspect of jhana as burning, it's the aspect of jhana, the other function of upanijjhana, of close contemplation. And originally I'd thought that I'd only read about upanijjhana in the context of attainment of jhana and attainment of with lokuttara dhammas, like when one talks about aramanupaniجjhana and lakanupaniجjhana. But here in this context, in the Patana, it's referring to it, that aspect of jhana, upanijjhana, close contemplation, with regard to citas such as the patisandhi and the other citas after seeing and hearing. So it's just some small detail and just an example of checking, but I think it just helps to understand how the factors in jhana pachya are working even at this moment, even though they are not the jhana factors leading to the attainment of jhana. But the term used for jhana factors, jhanankas, is exactly the same. So we have to know the context we're talking about. So in this case, it's about paccaya. And at lunch, Ajarn, you mentioned some aspect about understanding how it conditions, for example, this chitta now as being like just a pinch of salt in the ocean. It's just such a small, infinitesimal degree that it conditions, but all these different conditions lead to the arising of the chitta now, and this just shows how very anatta it is. Would you like to add anything more?
Because we have to understand what is the point of understand all paccayas in detail. What for?
I think that the only point is to, like, what is the point of even having the patana? The only reason is to make it so very, very clear how every reality, every detail, every aspect of life arises because of so many different and complex conditions and no self at all to be found. So it's just to point to how anatta everything in life is.
And can there be sati without understand the details like this?
Of course, because
So-
like seeing now, we don't have to know exactly. We know, for example, that seeing arises by having an object and having eye sense and having karma. We don't have to know the exact detail about how jhana paccaya conditions the next chitta, but not this one.
Is there any attachment to the idea that it should be known, or can I know?
Well, I think the point is, for example, like in Nina's case, because she asked me to pursue this. So, of course, there's attachment to everything, but if one is writing a book about conditions, one better get the detail correct, that's all.
And how long will it take to consider that?
Well, I think one just, if one is writing about it, one doesn't want to write the wrong thing.
What for?
I think one writes about it for for people to understand about how there are these different conditions in life.
And
one doesn't need to have all the detail, but one adds a certain amount of detail just to show that it is now these different conditions
doubt?
operating. Sorry?
Or doubt?
Well, they may read it and just have more and more doubt. That's true. So it depends. Yes, depends on the purpose. Yes, and like if someone, like you mentioned, for example, when a bhikkhu in Vietnam was asking us a lot of detailed questions about paccaya, and you were saying, well, if there's no understanding now of what appears, no understanding of Dhamma, what is the purpose of studying details about paccaya? And I remember one time when we were in Cambodia, and a friend got all these different tables and graphs about different paccaya, and you just moved it aside because if there's no firm understanding of Dhammas, it's pointless to discuss all the details. Just as you say, it will just lead to more speculation and doubt. But still, if we do mention something, it should be accurate. That's all.
And the time for doubt, how long? To understand reality right now. Thinking about that and still doubt.
This all started, this discussion about jhana paccaya, because a bhikkhu sent a question asking about these details. The problem is that if one just, and whether it was related to rebirth and whether it was conditioned by jhana paccaya and this sort of thing, so that was why I was checking to try and help. And this bhikkhu is an author and needs to have the detail correctly. The problem is that if one just replies and says, oh, it's useless to know these details and it just leads to doubt and no need to write about it in your text, then it doesn't help the immediate problem.
For whom to understand?
What was that point, Ajarn?
For whom
To understand.
to understand what is written about the details of Pajya?
Well, it's like if one reads, for example, the Visuddhimagga, and it gives the details of different Pajya, and someone will read it and they will have doubt and questions. And
What do you think?
I think it's good to know what piece of information will be helpful.
Is it helpful?
Is what helpful?
Talking about the details?
Well, it depends on how the level of understanding. So what I'm saying is, what is helpful is the information that will help to the next level of understanding, but beyond that is not really.
And who is that person who can understand?
Understand
The details.
the details. Well, the person who has some understanding already, that is like, for me, this level of detail is far beyond what I'm capable of having any direct understanding of. So, but something more basic like the sense doors and that sort of thing could be helpful. So it depends on the level of understanding. But some people, Ajarn, just have the accumulations to want to...
Who?
I'm not going to name any names.
Why?
Well, because we're not being personal here, we're just talking in general terms. So, but some
Not to
people
avoid-
have...
But I think that the best thing is to have them have understanding, very firm understanding about no self, and it will waste time. It will waste time for them to just think about this and try more to understand that.
Let's say
if we were
someone-
talking in Vietnam or Taipei or on Saturday and there were beginners here, then we wouldn't mention anything like that. But everyone here has
Really?
studied.
Everyone.
Well, maybe not all two. But most people here have studied quite a bit of detail, and quite a few people afterwards, asked to hear it a
To
little more clearly.
satisfy their curiosity.
Maybe, but you could say, for example, like Nina's books on conditions, it has quite a lot of detail.
What about
And-
the writer? It's not known. It's not known yet. Does not know yet. What about the reader?
But the writer may have the accumulations to write and to...
No
may
question.
have, someone may, before they even come to the Dhamma, they may have the accumulation to write down and send around things they are interested
For
in.
more
So,
interest?
well, one can't account for accumulations. People
To me, I don't think that
have to
it's
have it.
useful for me to know the details. Even some budget is enough to condition the idea of no self. Like now, for example, they're saying, shall we talk more about the details of each budget for seeing, or even seeing? It's not that we should see.
But if one, for example, is writing a book about the conditions, like Nina's written a book which is very
Just to
well
understand
received,
only.
so then one wouldn't just choose some conditions and not others. So this is the most difficult to understand Pachya, so one wouldn't leave it out and just talk about 23 Pachya. So that's why
Now,
it's
what are
now.
they? See? What are they now? Pajya for each citta right now.
Yes.
Not yet understood.
No. But if one doesn't hear anything about the different Pachya, then by hearing, for example, if one had never heard about Aramana Pachya and how each citta has an object now, one wouldn't know, like some people don't even know this. So by hearing and considering, then it is a condition for understanding now, to understand that yes, seeing cannot arise without visible object.
What
now.
about Visakha? When she met the Buddha, did she understand about the details of Paccaya?
No, and she didn't understand about the details of Vipassana Jnana. She probably didn't understand about the details of the citas in the sense door process. She probably had never heard of
So
Sampaticana and
shall we
Santirana.
try to help people to understand the details?
That's the question.
Yes, that's the question. It's like why talk about the details in the sense door process at all. So it depends who one's talking to. If one's talking to a beginner, then
Now he is not from now on.
you said the other day you wanted to use it as an example.
Because
so then
how
I wouldn't.
long you study and how long?
Yes.
You
So
said.
then I wouldn't talk about if it's someone is new about Sampaticana and Santirana, but if I'm talking to someone who has studied and considered quite a lot,
I know that he
then we
can
would-
understand, but not as much for those who studied for 20 or 40 years ago.
So
And some of us have studied for 20 or 40 years, but still our level of
That's it. That's why
knowledge
I
of
said that
detail
he's not
is
beginner
not,
now.
well, not so great, because people have different accumulation for the detail.
So now he's not the beginner.
I wasn't referring to him.
I refer to him.
I don't regard him as a beginner.
So how long did he study? Has been studying.
It depends what you mean by studying.
Yeah, please tell him how long.
Ajarn, studying about Paccaya, for
About
example.
Dhamma.
Oh.
Study.
Well, then it depends on what you mean by studying.
Yes.
That's a good question.
Like reading books about Dhamma, right? Well, maybe.
Understanding? What about the understanding? Reading without understanding and reading with understanding is different.
So, well, I don't know if I have ever read with understanding or not. Yeah.
I think this is an interesting question, because I've always felt actually that discussion about the reality of the present moment is the most useful discussion. But you could say that to some extent, even when this kind of detail is being discussed, it is also about the present moment.
Depending
So,
on the
yes.
person
Yes.
and who's that person who
Right.
really understands.
The person, as you said, who has firm understanding, who really
Can
is,
understand the details.
but can only understand intellectually some
So
details.
what's the use?
Yeah. Well, we can say what's the use, but it's being discussed,
Okay.
so one doesn't have any choice but
Okay.
to consider it.
There
really.
are two books. One is Sutta
Yes.
and the other is the details of Paccaya. What would you read?
Well, even the sutta is difficult to understand.
Yes, but it can be understood.
Yes. Yes, it needs commentaries.
Much
Yeah.
more than the details of Paccaya.
But can we say also, Ajarn, that it does depend on the...
Okay, and
I
who
mean,
am I?
I would always
Yeah.
go for the...
So the question is, who am I to read?
That's why I began by saying that one needs to know one's own level of understanding and what is useful for that.
Would you spend your whole life studying the details instead of having understanding of this moment?
No.
But Ajarn, one cannot decide to have understanding of this moment.
Yes, but what conditions? This moment.
Yeah.
Doubt about that? Or understanding this moment more and more
Right.
from the sutta and what we can understand?
Right. Well, I see that learning the details of the Paccayas would not help me much because it's very complicated to understand. But like learning the details of other things, like for example about the witty citas, I think that's much more easier to understand, and it's helpful also to understand the present moment.
So, what would you spend your time?
I will I will probably learn more about Viticitas than Pachaya, but
Even that is not easy, but it's so useful because it's now.
And actually, people think like you that maybe they're not studying Pachyas. They are. Like the other day, there was some comment about, well, that is by accumulations, not karma, for example. And we were talking about the distinction between karma and accumulations. So this is talking about different Pachyas, but actually it's so, without knowing it, one is understanding more about different conditions. And it's important to understand the difference between what is accumulation and what is vipaka, for example, what is karma.
I think it's is each individual accumulation to have interest, whichever, Pachya or Viticitta or other things. But I wouldn't say easier than the other. It's difficult.
And I remember, for example, Ivan used to say, he didn't like to study the details of the Viticitas because he found it didn't help him to understand this moment. But Ajarn would say, well, actually, one needs to study and consider more details. It's not enough just to hear that there's seeing now, visible objects seen, and hearing at another moment. One needs to learn and consider more details and how it can help. So one has, as you say, one has to know for oneself. Some people have accumulations.
And even if we don't say any word about the name of Pachaya at all, but understanding that this moment is conditioned, is that not enough?
Yeah, well, that's why, like the other day, we were talking about lobha and how it becomes habitual and is accumulated. We're not mentioning particular names, but it is actually the study and the understanding of Pachya at this moment.
ท่านอาจารย์ครับ When I was young, I have read about the book about conditions. At that time, I thought I understand. But when I have more understanding, I realized that at that time, I just believed the word. Like I believe the words and I follow the words without understanding. Just I believe this is cause, this is condition, something like that. But it wasn't understanding. So I think right now I have very low level of understanding to understand the detail of Pachaya. Even now, if someone asks me what is Jhana Pachaya, honestly, I don't know. I can say words, but I
there
don't.
must be Pachya, that's enough.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm a little bit surprised about what Ajarn is saying right now, because a few weeks ago, when we were talking in the hospital, I asked Ajarn if it was necessary to learn all the details of the Abhidhamma.
As much as you can understand.
Right.
What about reading without understanding? Is it useful?
It's not useful, yes.
So we have to consider each word, the meaning of that.
I had this friend, Kun A, from overseas, from America. She's asking which book to read. To start
Any,
reading.
with
Yeah.
understanding.
Yeah, so I recommended her Intl.Dhamma, but she said it's very, 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 very difficult for her to read. There's one Thai lady who, when I last went to see Sarita in New York.
But which book did you read?
Survey
book?
Survey of Intl.Dhamma, yes, in Thai. So I recommended her.
Would she like to make it easy?
Yes, that's what I told her. I said this book is not for just reading to, have to read until like I don't know how many lives. It's difficult. Like even for me, we are now in the group at the Bobe. We start reading Intl.Dhamma, and it's so difficult. We have to break into words by word, and it's still difficult to understand. Yes.
And if we think that we have to answer each question, that's wrong.
Yeah, we have to really understand what it is.
And the use of it.
Right. So we had two Vidyakon that helping, so it's very good.
So for her reading surveys are like for Peter reading some Pachya details, so it depends on the person's understanding, and sometimes people, they just want to read cover to cover, but maybe more useful to just read a few lines and reflect on it, and so it depends. Like for me, this is quite interesting and useful, but for someone else it's meaningless.
Yes, of course, yes.
Where's the Lopa?
Yes, that's what I should ask her.
And also I think that the details of Pachaya are like they come after, like the details of the characteristic of realities. So it's like enrolling on the university for the university degree without having like the basis. I don't think.
Definitely, if one's talking to someone who doesn't, like the gentleman who visited, who doesn't understand about nama and rupa and thinks there can be awareness of breath now and thinks there is an I that can follow a practice, for example, it's totally useless to talk about any kind of details. That one has to begin with the understanding of Dhamma and the understanding of nama and rupa and anatta, otherwise nothing else. It's like putting on the fancy parts of the roof of a house when there's no foundation at all. It's of no value.
To study more details of like how Vithi work, actually it's not our panya, it's the Buddha's panya, right? So the reason we study the details is because so that we know that there's no us in there, but each Dhamma arising and falling away and doing their function.
What's the point of study the teachings of the Buddha?
To understand the.
But when it brings doubt, is that the point?
Yes.
No.
Okay. Sorry, I misunderstood something. Yeah.
But what's wrong with doubt, Ajarn? Because doubt makes you think and reflect.
Would you like to have more doubt?
No.
What's the answer? What's wrong?
I would like to have more. But sometimes understanding comes from doubt, no?
Really? So doubt a lot. No. So you have panya a lot.
Oh, I see. Chronologically, yes, but not cause and effect. Well, in order, doubt precedes the understanding, but it doesn't give rise to the understanding.
Give what?
Doubt is sometimes followed by understanding,
right,
but it doesn't cause the understanding.
Yes.
How?
How, what, John?
How can it bring understanding?
No, I said it doesn't bring.
So?
I just said sometimes it happens first and is followed by understanding, but it doesn't cause the understanding.
But when there is no understanding at all, can there be understanding to arise?
No.
After doubt?
No.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the condition for understanding.
It's not a condition for understanding. But
If
people
it
think
there
there's
can be
because
understanding
sometimes
of
there's
the
doubt and then afterwards there's understanding, so they make a connection which isn't
That's why it
real.
needs understanding anyway.
Exactly.
And that's why it helps to understand the conditions. So, like, if you think that the doubt could be good because it could help one to consider and bring understanding, that's not understanding the conditions for understanding.
Otherwise, you don't need anyone or teacher because you have doubt, and then later you will have right understanding.
I'm thinking about when we think we know already, and we have no doubt about what we know.
Wrong
So-
or right?
Wrong. We know, we understand, we know wrong, but we think we know right. And so we have no doubt about anything. So we just continue.
But you have ignorance.
And also, I think that's almost a definition of wrong view, isn't it? We know wrongly, but we think we know rightly. That is the definition of wrong view, in fact.
Only one thing, that Pakatu Panisya Pachya includes everything. Even akusala can condition kusala, but not akusala itself, but it conditions the moment to have understanding because of wanting.
Everything is actually conditioned by ignorance in this way, so it's a very complicated and deep condition. So in this way we can say that ignorance or doubt or anything can condition understanding, but not directly.
I think if someone have wrong understanding without doubt, or someone has doubt, it's just the different kind of akusala. It doesn't bring more understanding. Only the Buddha's teaching bring right understanding more and more, in my opinion. Like it's not the cause. Even you don't have doubt, but you have wrong understanding. You have ignorance.
For example, you want to have understanding, right? That's the condition to find the right way or the right words.
One thing is akusala.
By Pakatu Panisya Pachya only.
What do you mean by that?
The Ajarn is explaining that there is a circumstance in which akusala can be a condition for understanding, and the example is when one wants to have understanding.
Yeah,
so that's why she's saying it's Pakatu Panisya.
Yeah, but I don't know what. As my understanding of Pachaya is very limited.
Oh, okay. Natural.
This is the
But listen, remember this verse and then you understand better. By one's life, very natural. What condition what?
Oh, Pakata.
Pakatu.
Pakatu
and
naturally.
Upanisya. with the
Pakata
support.
and Upanisya will become Pakatu Panisya.
That means like natural.
Right. Uh-huh.
But what means natural decisive condition? I mean, what is a natural condition? I don't understand.
If you don't
I mean,
want,
which other way
yeah,
could it be?
if you don't want to understand anything at all, it doesn't condition to find the right words. But by having just the want to understand, it will bring the way to have the right teachings, but not for all, only for some people. Because actually Pachya is no one. If you want to go to the meditation center, no understanding. But for the person who want to really understand, will find that. What about the other way or other words about that? Which is not just do this or do that.
So this is actually the broadest condition, because almost every moment of kusala and akusala now is conditioned by this condition. So when we talk about accumulations or habits or tendencies, it's referring to this condition. Like why in the middle of a Dharma discussion is one suddenly annoyed about something, Pakatu Upanisya Pachya, because of that tendency for annoyance. Yes, or why is there attachment to studying the details because of Pakatu Upanisya Pachya. So normally we talk about the tendencies accumulating, but actually by this condition, the attachment condition, understanding, or someone may perform great kusala, great act of generosity, and then it can be a condition for so much attachment to that kusala performed. So this condition, it actually is the main way of explaining why the kusala, akusala moments arise now as they are.
Pakata means done regularly, like kata, done often. So it becomes habitual.
So it does help to understand about conditions little by little, like why is someone may come here and there's some appreciation of what is being said and some understanding, and someone else may come and have no interest and be totally bored by it and not come again. So all depending on Pakatu Upanishya Pachya for that interest at this moment. Why interest in this but not in that?
So it sounds like a synonym for accumulation.
It is, yes. Mm-hmm. And so whenever we talk about accumulations, which you've heard a lot about, actually we're referring to this condition. Yes. And that's why there's nothing surprising in life, why at this moment there is kusala and not akusala, or why suddenly there's an outburst or someone's upset about something. So it helps to be more understanding of what is conditioned now, and the same for others. Anything can arise unexpectedly because of this condition. The other day we're talking about the tendency for drinking. No one would like to have this habit, but there is that tendency, that accumulation there. So even though one makes resolutions or one wouldn't like to have it, if there are conditions for that kind of lobha, then it arises. So all the conditions are really just to show how anatta this very moment is, this citta now, this cetasika arising now.
Ajarn, I suppose listening to the discussion today, I've often picked up in your book, and I still read it, still think about it, still try to understand it, and it's still not entirely clear to me certain aspects, and I valued the opportunity always to talk with you about it, and therefore I'm thinking, listening to what's been said today, it's going to depend on each individual to a certain extent. I realise that. And there are some people who ask questions that, from what you seem to be saying, Ajarn, are not really helpful for them to grow wisdom. That's what you seem to be saying to me. So you're saying really that certainly it's good to understand, that's why you wrote the book. You had, no doubt, a very good reason, because you wanted to help people to understand the Dhamma. And so you spent obviously a lot of time considering how best to do that. And there are many people, certainly including myself, that find it very, very helpful. And you were saying one time when we spoke in the hospital together, that the more nuanced your understanding is, the more helpful it is to grow Dhamma, or something like that. and certainly when I hear Consera asking questions which to me, for me, are well beyond, I'm interested, I'm curious. So then I'm thinking now, you seem to be saying there's a point where we should not ask, or there's a point where we must make sure, yes, I know you're saying we must not forget the reality of the present moment and learn to grow wisdom in that moment, which we mostly forget about and we have a lot of ignorance about. So you're going to say that a lot depends on the person who's asking the question. This is what I'm hearing you say, Ajarn, because I think I know who the person was who perhaps asked Consera that question, and I was following it online and I found it really interesting and helpful to a point. When somebody asks a question, sometimes a very sophisticated question and very which will require a lot of details and a lot of previous understanding, at least of the theory, you would say to that person usually that this may not be so helpful if I answer this. I'm realizing I'm a bit long-winded here, but I suppose I'm trying to deal with partly my confusion and also how much of the Dhamma or how much of pariyatti is useful. Like you asked the question, and you asked about Visakha, and of course we know she was only 7 when she became enlightened, and obviously she didn't have a detailed understanding, but probably because of her accumulations, she had obviously a lot of accumulated wisdom. So, and when some people came to see the Buddha, he probably did answer these questions, can we say?
When it's useless.
When it's useless. No, not when it's... No. He wouldn't answer when it was useless. He would answer only when it's useful. And sometimes he did not even speak.
For that particular person.
Yeah, for that particular person. So you're saying we should exercise a lot of discretion, really, a lot of the time when people ask questions.
Because you see that from hearing and reading, it doesn't bring the understanding. No. Because there is the idea of self all the time. So I think that, first of all, there must be very firm confidence on no self, no one. There are only realities. That's why we read about the citta from the moment when it arises as Panchadwara Vachana, to see that how can anyone know that the way Dhamma is just conditioned, because they cannot be just seeing at once, but there must be citta before that. So we understand the reason for each one better than if I know, but I will talk to them as I know. That's wrong, because I better help them to understand rather than talk about my understanding. That's useless. No use for them at all.
So if you know, because you were saying just then in your answer then, Ajarn, that if they have got strong confidence, that...
Mm-hmm.
But of course, we know that some people, they may even be ordained, and so they have a certain degree of confidence.
With understanding?
No.
So it's useless?
Yes. Well, it's just probably not helpful, is what Butch was saying there. Contraindicated.
No, that it gives the opposite effect, actually. You may think that because you're ordained, then it means that you have confidence, and that's a condition for understanding, but it can actually be the opposite. How do you say? Contraproductive, something like that, right?
Counterproductive.
counterproductive. Yeah.
Not on that point, but just on something that Sundara mentioned about the discretion in answering questions as being Ajarn's message. I had a slightly different impression, so which perhaps I could mention, that I thought the emphasis was on discretion in asking questions, in bringing up questions of detail.
I'm not quite following your point, Jonathan, sorry.
You said
Yes.
that you understood from what Ajarn said that the message was discretion in answering questions.
Yes. Yes.
And
yes.
the impression I had was discretion in asking questions, in seeking to know details that are beyond one's level of understanding.
Yes. I think I get your point, but there are some people who, like, I think I understand the kind of discretion you're talking about, but some people don't realise that they haven't got that discretion and they think they have. Do you see what I'm saying?
Well, sometimes, I mean, it depends on the occasion, like we've been in Vietnam when bhikkhus have asked very detailed questions and you know that really there isn't any basic understanding, but sometimes one has to give an answer that is satisfactory to them to a degree and then bring it back to this moment and question the value of it. If one just says, I'm not going to answer that, we're just going to talk about seeing now, then they may walk out. So it's finding what is helpful for them at the time and bringing it back to this moment and to a level that they can understand and stressing what is of greatest importance.
So what you seem to be saying there, Sarah, is that you're trying to be as compassionate as you possibly can because you realise it's a rare opportunity to hear the Dhamma, and you don't want to perhaps discourage them. Yeah.
But put them off.
Yes.
But compassion has to be accompanied by wisdom, and sometimes even if you answered according to their question and you don't go straight into the seeing or something, they might also walk out.
You didn't switch on the mic.
Oh, yeah. I was saying that you can, even though you try to follow a little bit their topic before coming back to the topic about the present moment, they might also walk out either way, right?
Anything can happen by conditions, but actually the aim is to come back to this moment and help anyone to understand the basics and understand about dhammas and anatta in the beginning. But yes, how one approaches it depends. Yes.
Right now, I remember the day at the hospital when I asked Ajarn about learning the details of the Abhidhamma, and I gave like an example, Shariputra, that he didn't need to know anything about Abhidhamma. He just heard two phrases, two sentences, and then he became enlightened. And Ajarn told me, but what about his past lives? Right.
Same for Visakha.
And how about for Sariputta, when he did hear the Buddha teach all the details of the Abhidhamma, he could understand it all in detail because of those accumulations from aeons ago. Yeah.
But somehow I feel that the message today regarding Visakha and the message in the hospital regarding Shariputra is almost like the opposite message, because this time is emphasizing, talking about Visakha is emphasizing like we don't need to learn complicated things or many details in order to have understanding. And the other time when we talked about Shariputra, what I understood was that when Ajarn said that, asked me what about his past life, that meant that, he didn't have to study it now, but he studied it before. So if I want to become Chariputta or be enlightened one day, then I have better start studying the details. Yeah.
And actually it depends on the context, because, like people say, oh, Baha'ya just met the Buddha and became enlightened, but yeah, he'd studied a lot of detail, a lot of...
You will wait until then, like the details. It's not in this life. What about next life? What about next life? The same or more understanding, the details. We don't have to wait. We don't have to hope or want to be such. But whatever can bring understanding of no one here, no self at all. Only some of his words we think carefully, like all dhammas are anatta. See, just that sentence, all means now, and whatever, which no selection at all. It depends on whether there's condition to have awareness arise or not. Not just a try to know the details before there can be such moment.
On the point of complicated detail, I think there's no doubt, because the Dhamma is very deep and detailed, and so at some point...
Yes.
And complicated. Yes. And so at some point there is a need for very deep knowledge and detailed knowledge. But it's a question of what is appropriate for one at one's level, present level of understanding. So, as Ajarn said, we don't need to wait. There's no need to wait, but there's no hurry either, because there can only be so much development of understanding in a given lifetime. And a lot depends on the circumstances. One might find oneself in a situation where people around one are discussing detailed matters of Abhidhamma, so one does absorb some information that way. But it's what's important, I think Ajarn is saying, as I understand her to be saying, it's important to appreciate what level of detail is helpful for one's present level of understanding.
I think I have heard Thanajan say it as much as you can. It means the question, who am I, is very useful. You know the level of your understanding. And if whatever you study, if it brings more doubt but not more understanding, is useless. But if you can understand about it, you can learn more and more. And I think Than Pasariputta, he had accumulated 1 asongkhai and 100,000 cup. So he was so different from us.
I mean, don't wait until you have more understanding about the details.
It's like the other day, Jan was saying that after she had studied with a teacher afterwards, she was interested to read the text and check the details and see what was right and what the Buddha really taught. And I have that kind of interest too. I like to study the details or read the text. I never thought I should study in order to have more understanding, or I better read about the conditions. It's not like that at all, but it's just accumulations. And but actually there's no rule at all about it. It just depends what's useful at the time. I never think today I better read the Patana instead of reading the newspaper. I like reading the newspaper too, and I don't think that one is Dhamma and one is not Dhamma. because seeing is seeing whichever time, or whether I'm here or not here. I don't think I need to be at the foundation for understanding. It just depends on the occasion and the accumulations, and it comes back to the understanding at this very moment, to know what is the motivation, or what is the interest, or what is useful. I remember the very first time I read Abhidhamma in daily life, I just skipped the chapters on bhavanga citas and processes because it just wasn't of interest. But now those details are of interest and relevance. So what is useful one time may not be useful at another, and vice versa. So like if one's talking to someone about accumulations, in the beginning one doesn't mention Pakatu Upanishya Pachya, and one certainly doesn't talk about Jhana Pachya, but gradually one learns a little more, because it's relevant to daily life now.
It doesn't mean you don't study anything or don't study about very deep or complicated of the Buddha's teaching, but you study whatever can bring more understanding of no self, and if you have more right understanding, you will honest to yourself what level of your understanding.
And no one knows the other's accumulation. It has to be oneself.
That's right.
Like people often quote the example of Chula Pandaka rubbing the white cloth and saying, "Oh, you just need to rub it." But he also, from his past lives, had studied so much Abhidhamma, so much detail in intricate ways, but just the Buddha knew his accumulation or what is helpful at that moment.
But we still don't know the details for this person or that person.
Yeah, we have no idea.
But we also don't know it about ourselves, right?
When there's panya, panya knows, not you know.
That's why when we're helping the other, like whether we answer the question or don't, or we just do our best according to
But do you think that they would stop at that? No more curiosity?
Sometimes when people have more and more understanding about the realities in daily life, the questions become more relevant now. Like I remember one friend in Vietnam, all his questions the first time were about devas and some strained nibbana, but then started coming each time, and gradually the questions are more about the realities of daily life. So of course there will still be curiosity, but one begins to appreciate that studying the Dhamma, it's more precious to ask and understand about Dhammas at this moment.
So for them they have to begin to have real understanding, not just think that one understands.
Like we gave a copy of a book to a staff member at our hotel who had some interest, and he said he was going to go home and read the book, and the next day I asked how he got on with it. This was Nina's Buddha's Path. And he said, oh, he straight away read the chapter on Nibbana. So this is, in the beginning, this is the kind of thing people want to hear about because of their curiosity. But gradually, if there is more understanding, then they begin to realize it's far more precious to understand about seeing now or hearing now.
Actually, when there's more understanding, the last chapter you want to read is the chapter about Nibbana.
Yes.
And now that when Pete was saying that Shariputra is very different from us, right? But I think in one moment he was the same like us.
Many
Yeah, but it's the same case as us.
He has to study from one.
Us?
He has to study from zero like us. You mean, right? Yes, of course.
Not from zero, but from very little.
But we cannot do that because we have no accumulation like Sariputta.
That's right.
But Chariputta in the past, one day he was like us also.
Yes, but what about when it goes on time? Go on and on, see, different accumulation.
Ajarn, I'd like to hear the explanation a bit more from you about to see the danger of samsara. What, like now we come here to have a discussion, study Dhamma every Saturday or whatever. Is this, we see the danger of the samsara or not? Or
It depends on how much there is understanding. For example, like the 3 kinds of Vedana, which is dukkha. The first one is dukkha, everyone knows. What about the second one? Sukha is also dukkha, by way of it's changed all the time. You see that we were born and then we like many things. Never enough.
we never see the danger.
Never crave for this and that. And after this, next one come. All the time. Is it good? And this is dukkha, just to experience that which is pleasant, that's all. So for dukkha, no one knows and understand that no one likes it to arise at all, but crave for sukha and never enough. Very tired to just have this and then more and more and more and more, changing all the time. Why not just one? Impossible. That's not the danger. That is the danger of clinging to samsara because samsara is every moment. Without one, it's not samsara. So learn to understand that it's so tiring to just wanting and wanting. We have that, not enough. New one coming all the time. From this life to next life. On and on and on. If there is the understanding of this, there is the beginning of to be tired of sukha. It's just a moment, that's all. As long as there is only the understanding of dukkha, everyone knows, but as self, that is not enough. But when it's sukha, everyone wants to have it, but just for a moment it's gone, and never enough. So we goes on living from life to life. That's why there must be understanding of dukkha stage by stage. If there is still like today, very much enjoy the food, lunch and so on, how can the seeing the danger of just arise to like, to be attached, is useless because that's gone from moment to moment. But it has to be like this as long as panya is not enough. To understand from now and then no more, and then thinking or understanding again and again and again, it depends on understanding the moment when it arises. When it arises, it's not the experiencing directly as not self, but it will bring later literability. Otherwise, if there's no thought about this like this at all, we still cling to life and samsara.
And we go on thinking like we learn elsewhere, we think of dukkha just as painful feeling or something like this, but actually don't appreciate the pleasant feeling, the sukha, as dukkha too, because it's just as impermanent
and that is not enough. There must be the other tuk of sankhara, see, of everything, not just like that. Even wanting to understand this or that, or to do or to go or whatever.
ท่านอาจารย์ครับ when I talk to my friends or my sisters, and sometimes they have like terrible things in lives, and they said like, "Oh, I don't want to be in samsara anymore." Yes.
So there must be the understanding of anatta from the very beginning, and understanding all dhammas. As long as it's not all yet, it's impossible to letting go the idea of self. It's still I. See.
And this not wanting it and just wanting a break, this is not what is meant about being bored or tired with samsara, or really seeing the danger of sukha or pleasant feeling or whatever is conditioned now, because it's impermanent and just the object of clinging that brings more and more
Yes, I agree with that.
disturbance.
Because I asked them that, what if you are happy all the time? Do you want to be in samsara? And they said yes.
All the time to nothing.
So the most important thing to study Dhamma is just to understand what is appearing now. So this is dukkha. Seeing now, hearing now is dukkha. It's hard. It is very subtle and hard to understand. See, so the first noble truth, the Buddha pointed out is dukkha ariya satya. It's whatever arises and falls away is dukkha. So should be known, should be understand. What about other doubt about what is not appearing now? It's useless.
Yes, I think when someone says, "I don't want to be in samsara," is from dosa vulacitta. Is not right understanding, because they just want to leave.
And it's like when we're talking to beginners or in different places, everyone wants to know has questions about dosa. What shall I do when I have so much regret, or my husband's jealous, or I have this painful experience? Everyone wants to get rid of dosa because of I. But no one says, I've got this problem of so much sukha in my life. Or how about the problem with seeing or hearing now, or too much panya now? But actually each panya, each seeing, each moment of sukha is dukkha, is unsatisfactory, and it is dangerous. So this is the danger of life in samsara.
And it would be very surprising if you say, you don't have to do anything at all. Yeah.
What did you mean anything, Ajarn?
Will you do?
What can you do? What can you do? Yeah, exactly.
Where?
If you have a lot of dosa, if there's a lot of dosa now, what can you do?
You can't do anything.
You mean
It's gonna
to
arise.
get
You're
rid of it?
telling him the answer.
You mean to get rid of it,
Yes.
or what to do?
What can you do to get rid of
Deal with
the...
it.
Whatever, how to deal with it.
What would I do with it?
To deal with it. What can you
How
do
would
to
I deal with it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Don't
Well-
tell him the answer.
ไม่เทล no ไม่เทล
I would just accept it.
I will.
Well, acceptance. I think acceptance has to. There can be acceptance through understanding or through ignorance, of course. Right. But right.
So can I deal with it? So can you deal with it? Can you
No.
have
Well,
understanding?
if there's
Can you have acceptance?
No, I mean through conditions, yes.
So no one can do anything about it.
Right.
No one can have acceptance. No one
Right.
can make understanding arise.
Right.
No one can
get-
deal with it in the first place.
So there's no way, or what?
There's what? No.
No way to deal, or what? To do what?
Well, the ways is understanding.
So let's have understanding from the teachings of the Buddha only.
particularly when we say, or when Ajarn says, this is our what for those who see the danger of life in samsara. Well, most of the time there's no seeing of any danger of life in samsara.
Like lunch this afternoon.
You are looking for dinner.
I'm looking for next Tuesday lunch for everybody already.
Next Tuesday?
Like there will be discussion here. Pichi said they're going to be here until the 5th, right? Or not?
Next Tuesday, yes.
You're going to be here until the 5th, right?
No, until 29th, until Thursday.
Oh, I
Or
see.
this next Thursday.
Yes, yes.
So
And Alberta also. And Hung.
Han is coming.
Yes.
So there will be discussion here on Tuesday
Tuesday or Thursday?
and Thursday, right?
Not Thursday.
Not Thursday,
we won't
only
be
Tuesday.
Tuesday.
So lunch for Tuesday.
Next Sukha.
Next Tuka, yeah.
Not enough. Never enough. That is
Is
dukkha.
testing one of the most difficult Dhamma to understand, right, Sanjan? Or everything is, it depends. No, food is very difficult, no?
Not enough. Never
Never
enough.
enough. Everything, never enough. Seeing, smelling, tasting.
And so many different citas, moments of kindness, moments of attachment, moments of I, moments of sukha, moments of forgetfulness, so many different citas. Actually, each one just a moment in samsara and gone completely.
Yes.
What's happened's happened, no point thinking about it. Just a dream or an idea about what happened at lunch, but actually all gone.
Sorry.
Just thinking now only.
Right, right.
All the time do nothing.
Can you do?
Oh, I see.
Yes.
But once I told Ajarn that that in order to once I told Ajarn that we didn't need to do anything, but Ajarn said no, that's not correct.
What's wrong? What's right?
I think what Ajarn meant was that understanding has to be developed. It's not just stop doing everything.
Not by you. Life goes on
Right.
by conditions.
The other meaning is that there's no one
Mhm.
who can understand. Actually.
This is the point. Otherwise, it must be always I.
I was just going to add the idea of doing something and the idea of not doing something are both the wrong, not the right approach. Yeah.
And life goes on as it always has. You book your accommodation, you eat your lunch, or you make your mistakes. You don't have conventional sati. You pick up the microphone, but in reality, no doing at any moment. No one who can do anything. Just chitta, cetasika, and rupa. That's the point. Because sometimes people have the wrong idea. They hear about dharmas as anatta, and then they say, oh, well, there's no point going to work, there's no point doing this, and it becomes like an excuse for just nothing or doing nothing, but that's wrong understanding of atta too.
Or someone said, I can do any bad things because no self.
Or somebody can say, I can just continue my normal daily life without need to learn anything also, right? And that's a way of not doing anything because you just continue with what has been natural for you always. Yeah, with that.
I don't need to hear any more details or come to the discussion because I've heard about seeing an invisible object and it's enough, and I know all of that already, and so there can be any kind of excuses.
ท่านอาจารย์ครับ it's very easy to go the wrong way ครับ
You don't have to do anything.
Actually, no one who goes the wrong way, just moments of wrong view that arise by conditions and fall away instantly. So any way to avoid dukkha at this moment?
Because it arises by conditions, not by the will of us, of some kind of entity.
Do
Actually-
you mean that dukkha arises all day?
Every moment is dukkha.
Can we say dukkha arises?
All day,
It's
all
a
life.
characteristic of Dhammas, right? It's just a characteristic of
Mhm.
Dhammas, yeah. All Dhammas are dukkha.
But you enjoy dukkha so much.
That's dukkha vipallasa, right?
Me, the
Huh?
Is there any term? Dukkha vipallasa.
What?
Is there any term? Dukkha vipallasa?
ไม่มี dukkha vipallasa หรอครับ
ไม่มีเลยค่ะ It's the truth, not vipallasa. There is sukha vipallasa, but never dukkha vipallasa.
ขอโทษนะ
Unless one goes to the meditation center and then it's dukkha.
Dukkha vipallasa.
Ajarn, look, I'd like to ask this question here that's not so clear to me. It's to do with piti, and
How detailed is this question?
well,
I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
okay. It's regarding the 89 system as opposed to 121 chittas. There seems to me to be a discrepancy. Reading here about piti, I'll just for everybody's benefit a little bit. Piti is delighted, satisfied and thrilled, and therefore it can only arise together with pleasant feeling. All right, and with other kinds of feeling, not with other kinds of feeling. Excuse me. Enthusiasm or rapture arises together with 51 types of chitta, which are accompanied by pleasant feeling, namely the 18 types of kamawaccha chittas. We don't need to go into all those, but what I'm interested in is, by way of the first jhana, there are 11 types. Now, then in the second jhana and the third jhana, because it mentions that piti is in 3 jhanas. So, when we look at the difference between 89 chittas and 121, there's extra 32. Correct, Ajarn? There's extra 32 chittas.
The Makha with jhana makes
Yes,
it
there are 32. So when they talk
40.
well, there are. Well, I understand that there the difference between 89 and 121 is 32. So that just leaves 32. Correct?
I'm not good on
Oh, I see. All right.
calculation.
Well, what I'm confused by is that if PT is arising in 3 of them, it's still 2 jhanas to go. And it doesn't make any sense to me. That there's some discrepancies here, but quite apart from that, I'm trying to figure out how, with piti, how can piti arise with 3 jhana chittas when there's only 32 extra? It doesn't add up to me. I'm trying to...
What feeling is better than sukha?
No, piti. I'm talking about piti.
Yes, because piti arises with pleasant.
Yes, only with pleasant feeling. So it will arise with in the first 3, or the first 2, or the first 3 jhanas. Is that right? Correct, Ajarn?
Count again.
Well, you've got, when you look at those jhana factors, piti will arise in the first 3 jhanas, not the last 2, or depending on what...
How they're counted, whether that's counted as 4 or 5.
2. So, but there's only 32 extra jhana chittas, and there's, perhaps I can wait for another time, but it doesn't seem to add up.
5 jhanas with 8.
Yes, that's true, but yes, there are 5 jhanas, but sometimes there is the 4-fold system.
By way of how we count.
By way of how we count.
Yes.
But, yes, I understand that, but what I'm trying to say is that piti, can only arise with either 2 jhana with 2...
Can piti arise with upekha?
Yes.
Piti?
Has to be a pleasant feeling.
Yes, but...
Piti cannot arise with upekha feeling.
Okay, well, perhaps I'm confused here. So, if we look at those jhana factors, you've got vitaka, vichara in the first jhana, and depending on whether or not you use the...
It depends on we count by way of 4 or by way of 5.
By way of 5.
Because some people can not have the vitaka and we can have vitaka and vichara only sometimes only 1, sometimes 2,
That's
depending
right.
on the person.
Yeah, that's right. So perhaps in the second jhana they may not have vitaka and vichara, but there will be by way of the 5-fold system, or by way of the 4-fold system, there will be by way of the 4-fold system, there won't be piti in the 3rd jhana, correct? It will be only in the first 2 jhanas.
It depends on feeling, because piti cannot arise with upekha. Whenever it arises.
All right, yes, okay, all right,
Yeah.
that's a bit clear. I'll perhaps leave it at that, because that's given me some understanding of a certain point of it, and then I can think about it more. Thank you, Ajarn.
So this is a good example, so it just depends on the occasion, how one responds, how one answers. We were talking a bit about piti earlier, because people often assume or talk about piti like, I mentioned friends often used to say when they go to India, oh, so much piti, and people assume it's kusala piti, but usually piti, which arises, is with attachment. So when one feels so joyful to be at the foundation or to see Ajarn, is it kusala or akusala piti? So
No, that's a really good point, and that's, I think, one of the valuable things of learning Dhamma, because when we read about somanassa, we know it's either with lobha or it also can be with kusala, and that's valuable even at that level to understand that. So that level of pariyatti is very helpful. But you're right, especially when it comes to piti, and I used to think that too myself, that piti is kusala. But
people might think whenever they open the Dhamma book and there's piti, that it must be kusala, but these are just assumptions, so it all comes back to the understanding at this moment. And when we were talking the other day about Sankara and Asankara Dhammas, So prompted, unprompted, strong, weak. But usually, like we're talking about, for example, the citta with pita arises.
Usually we talk about kama vajra citta.
Kama vajra cittas. And we can say that one is strong and one is weak, or one is prompted, one is unprompted, but actually in life, usually there are different shades of grey. There's usually a continuum, so it's not like it's either strong or weak. Like if someone says, come and have lunch, there may be strong lobha or weak lobha, but usually it's something in between. So it's difficult to, when we just categorize all lobhas.
When you say something in between, you mean what kind of citta?
What I mean is, like if we say that citta with lobha is prompted or unprompted or strong or weak, but in between means actually it's in between strong and weak, or in between prompted and unprompted. So it
has to be either one.
Yes, I know, but that seems very black and white for actually the reality that's arising now. Like, is the piti arising strong or weak, or prompted, unprompted? We know from our study it must be one or the other, but usually there's often something in between.
Like now, is there something in between seeing and hearing?
Not between seeing and hearing, but
Yes.
whether the okay, but whether the piti or the lobha,
because what is there must be understood.
Yeah.
That there must be something in between. But when it's not reality, just say in between, we cannot find out the truth.
Okay, by in between, I mean that usually, for example, the degree of lobha, we know actually it must be either rising with asankarika or sasankarika citta at that moment. It must be prompted or unprompted, but often...
Excuse me, for moha mula citta, what are they?
Well, that is different, because I don't think that we talk about asankarika or sasankarika for moha, so that doesn't apply. But if we're talking about like dosa, whether it was prompted by another word and whether it's strong or not, well, it seems that often it's neither strong nor weak, but we know it must be from the text.
That's why it does mean that we should know exactly what is this citta, sasankarik or
Impossible
asankarik.
to know, but it's, yes, just that those definitions are strong or weak, because often it's middling, or that's what I mean by in between. We can't know. We just accept that the text says it's like this, so it must be like that, and we know that it can be strong or weak, but that's all.
No one can persuade the other to have avijja.
For lobha or dosa, easy.
Ajarn has used a good word there that I've just heard recently too, that difference, sometimes sasankarika and asankarika, it can be not that the words are not the important thing, but I think it's a very good translation, persuaded or unpersuaded, as opposed to prompted and unprompted. To me that feels better than...
And that persuaded can be by one's own thinking too, not necessarily have to be anyone else. One can, at the moment of seeing
and
the
what
food...
is stronger?
And what is stronger? Well, it will always be the unprompted one.
Unpersuaded.
Yeah, unpersuaded.
Unpersuaded.
Well,
I'm not sure I like that term because it seems to refer to the individual
rather than the mental factor. And unpersuaded, as we know, means I'm not convinced
by
what
conditions.
by condition.
One other phrase I heard you mention, which I just wanted to ask about. You mentioned that good deeds can prolong life, a condition like iddhipada.
Please.
Good deeds can prolong life, a condition like iddhipada. So I wanted to know what you meant, but you're not. No.
There are many conditions.
Yes, yes, a condition like iddhipada. I don't know
So
whether
it's
it was
beyond our
meaning
thought.
kusala chanda or kusala panya perhaps. So maybe it was referring
because
to
you
these
see there are many
factors.
conditions for death to happen. So we don't know that, which
No.
is very complicated.
Yes.
Because there are not only one karma, but so many karmas who can perform different functions, like to support or
Yes.
to...
And we can see even the Buddha's life was
Yeah.
not as long as yours, so it's so many good conditions. That's why it was a little strange.
As much as we can say, it's by conditions.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's
I'm sure you're
right.
well know.
Kusala chitas may be a factor, like you said, just the concern to share Dharma is conditioned to take one's medicine.
Never
but
know.
So many different factors.
Yeah, and I'm sure you know this anyway, Sarah, but I think it's because I was just reading this only last couple of days that I believe there are something like 16 different times that the Buddha gave opportunities to Ananda to allow him to live longer, but he didn't take up those opportunities. So there were many, many times, and even though Ananda asked him that last time, he said no. He made it very clear that he had given him many opportunities, and he said, that is your fault. I thought it seemed to me rather harsh, but he said to him, that is your fault. Anyway.
Just another condition.
Yes,
yeah.
yes, that's right.
Yeah.
I don't know how it's true, but I've heard it said with all the Buddhas that whatever, because sometimes they can live up to, well, in our particular kalpa it's 100 years of age, but in other Buddhas it's sometimes up to 1,000 or 10,000 years that they live, it seems, but they only live 80% of their kalpas. So it seems that no matter, different conditions, but I was interested too that they never live the full kalpa. They only live a percentage of that kalpa, 80%, I understand.
There's always an Ananda who doesn't say
No,
no.
that's right. Perhaps. And thank you, Ajarn, for coming on these days, these last couple of days, and I understand you're probably going to come next week, because I know it's not always so easy for you, but we appreciate it.
Because I can live. For Dhamma.
Yes. So we request you to stay as long as you can.
Not 200.
Up to 100, if you can.
200?
And could cheat as well.
เสาร์อาทิตย์ โอ้คุณ Now, all of this about the Mahaprabhu's Makum and Yeah, and the book.
My question is, you would like to, because we're talking about the order, like to send, here we have Tipitaka and some commentaries. Do you want to send Tipitaka and the commentaries, or just send it?
We have talk with Kun Vijay after this.
Shall I? Or Frank or Smith?